Hello everybody and welcome to part 2 of how to answer a literature extract question. This is for CIE 0475 or 0992 and this is for the play The Crucible. So let's have a look at what we did in part 1. So in part 1 we looked at how to interpret and deconstruct an extract question. We looked at how to understand the extract significance and also how to analyse in time conditions. We annotated the extract for a range of different techniques and devices that we could potentially use in our answer, and then we brainstormed different ideas in response to the question and made a plan. So let's have a look at the plan that I made at the end of the last lesson. So you can do your plan as a table like this, or if you would prefer and if you're running out of time, then just jot down the 3-point sentences that you think that you would like to use, and then go back through your extract, number the quotations. So this would be point 1, so then you would have all of the ones would be the quotations that you'd like to use for this point. This is point 2, this is point 3. And then as you're numbering them, or even as you've gone through, you should be analysing and adding notes. So think about the devices that are used, the techniques that are used, the word choice, what can you say about them? And as always, do link back to the question itself. So this question is about relationships. So what do you learn about relationships? What's presented to you? How are you interpreting the relationship? So add all these notes as you go. And then really what you're doing when you're writing up is you're just pulling everything together based upon these point sentences. So this is an idea of how you would add your quotations to a plan. So I did go through this in the last session, so if you have missed that, do go back and have a look. So as you can see, all of these ones are the quotations that potentially I would like to use in point 1, and all the 2s are what I potentially would use in point 2, and then we have all the 3s for point 3. So in some cases I've got maybe 3 for all quotations. I may not use them all. Once I start writing, I'll decide which ones I think are the strongest, which ones I think maybe I don't need anymore, but it's good to have a range of options. So just going back to the essay structure. So try and follow this essay structure just to give your writing some coherence, some focus, some clarity. Very brief introduction, use the author's name, in this case it's Miller, give a brief overview of what happens in the extract, why it's important, really make sure that you're addressing the keyword in the question. Give an overview of what you're going to talk about. These are the keywords that you've got from your main idea, so these are all the ones that I've already got in my plan. So if we go quickly back to the plan here, we've got desire, we've got power struggle, and we've got the idea that their relationship is complicated. So all of that really should feed into my introduction. Then you've got your 3 different points, which we've got a plan for, and then the conclusion, if you have time, 1 or 2 sentences. Just think about what you've proven in terms of the question. In this instance, what have you proven in terms of the relationship, how it's presented to you, why it's presented in a certain way? What have you learned from the extract in terms of the relationship? Link back to the keyword. Think about what Miller is trying to show the audience, what he wants to leave you with, what he wants you to learn or understand. And just giving you this here, this is a bit more of a detailed breakdown of how you could structure each different point. So this is my introduction, and just a reminder of the question, how does Miller vividly portray the relationship between John Proctor and Abigail in this section of the play? So the focus here is relationship. So remember, in my introduction, I'm just giving the author's name, making sure that I really pull that back to Miller. Brief overview, why it's important, reference to the keyword in the question, slight overview of what I'm going to talk about. This is where I pull together my own keywords that I put down in my plan. So in this extract, Miller successfully engages the audience by presenting a private moment between Proctor and Abigail and revealing the nature of their complicated relationship. So why is the extract significant? Why is it key? Why is it important? It's important because he's presenting a private moment and he reveals the nature of their relationship. The relationship initially presented by Miller appears flirtatious and playful. However, we are quickly introduced to the conflict and tension that exists between them due to the secret and sinful nature of their affair. So here we've got what is presented in relation to the question. In addition, Miller creates tension in this extract by presenting not only the latent desire between the 2 characters, but also the power struggle between them. And as you can see, everything that's green, all of this is linked to what I will actually now cover in my essay. So if you've got a good plan, the introduction should be really quick and easy to write down. So let's have a look at an example. So this example is my point 1, and I'll just remind you of what that was from my planning table. So my initial point here, the first one I want to make is Miller effectively presents the desire between Proctor and Abigail. So I will now develop this into a full paragraph. This will now be a section of my essay. So before we get going, just have a look here at the checklist. So I've given a checklist just to help you as well know what you've included and what you still need to include. It's always really good to have a checklist that you're working with, and the checklist here is based upon the mark scheme and it's based upon the assessment objectives. So it's everything that you need to demonstrate or include within your essay. So we've got relevant point, that shows your understanding of the text, of the question. Reference to your point throughout, so whatever your point is here, so the key word in my point is desire, and I must make sure that I'm proving that all the way through. So whenever you see this in red, this is where I've come back to it, and you can actually see that I've made reference back to my point several times throughout just to prove that what I'm saying is relevant. Consistent focus on the key word in the question. The key word on the question is relationship, and as you can see, I've got references to relationships several times here, and sometimes it's not relationship, but it's a synonym for relationship, or it's making reference to relationship, so it doesn't have to be exactly the same word. So I've got here personal connection, which also is a reference to a relationship. Evidence that's introduced and embedded. So if you are struggling with how to introduce and embed your quotations, do have a look at my micro lessons. There's a very short session that shows you exactly how to do that effectively. Every time you identify, you name a technique or dramatic device, anytime you comment on language, and then we've also got analysis and interpretation of techniques, devices and language. Reference to the effect on the audience. We've also got writer's intention, so what Miller was trying to do, what he wants you to understand, what he wants you to feel or think. And then we've got context. So if it's relevant, by all means use context to reinforce your point or to take your interpretation further. And then we've got some added extras here that really help you with your writing style. And that's some academic phrases and also linking phrases. So your academic phrases, just that little added extra, and they just help with the sophistication of your expression. And your linking phrases show that you are developing your ideas, they are progressing, that you are building. So we have our point here. So this is the point from my planning table. Miller effectively presents the repressed desire between Proctor and Abigail within this extract. The extract begins with Proctor's response to Abigail's flirtatious comment on his strength. So it's always a good idea to try and approach this in the order of which it appears in the extract and just put it into context. So let the examiner know exactly whereabouts in the extract you are referring to. So I've said I've got this from the beginning. Through the stage direction, so we have reference to a dramatic device here, Miller cleverly reveals Proctor's reaction to her words and indicates that the faintest suggestion of a knowing smile is on his face. So we've effectively embedded and introduced the quotation here. The use of the personification, so we've identified a technique of knowing smile. So we've also said which part of the quotation is the personification. So we've identified it's this part. Reveals the secrecy and intimacy of their past relationship. Not only do I have a focus back on the question here, but I'm interpreting meaning. So I'm developing my own interpretation and I'm considering the implications of this personification. And it hints at the latent desire between them, so I brought back to my point. Furthermore, it could also be seen to suggest that Proctor is not in control of his own reaction towards Abigail due to his suppressed desires. So we're showing here that we're developing this idea further. This link to Proctor's suppressed desires, so we've also got a link here, shows that we're developing. So we've got suppressed desires here, we've got suppressed desires here. We're taking the same idea further. So this link to Proctor's suppressed desire is also a reference to his hamartia, as this illicit relationship is his fatal flaw, which he suffers for later on. So we're also developing our interpretation of what we think this means. In addition, the fact that the smile is faint could link back to the sinful aspect of their relationship. So we're zooming in and commenting on one word here and what we think it implies or what is suggested. This word suggests that the smile is almost hidden, just like their affair. So this is quite a good interpretation of what the language here could mean and what it could refer to. As they continue to talk, more is revealed about their relationships. We've gone back to the question here, and Miller effectively builds up the sense of desire between them. So as we continue, as we move on to our next quotation, we're also setting the scene, we're putting everything back into context, and we're also showing how this is all still relevant to the point and the question. It could be argued that the growing desire, so we've gone back to desire, is reflected through the growth of John's smile. So we've now said that the desire is growing and we've linked it to what we see in the extract. So if you did watch session 1, I did go through, there were 2 quotations that I was actually going to use together, and they were both to do with John's smile and how it developed. His smile is described as widening. So you don't always have to have a long quotation. You can sometimes have one word as your quotation. So I've put the rest of it into my own words here, and then the only word that I really need is widening. The use of this verb, so we're focusing on language here, shows a development from the smile being only a faint suggestion, so this is a reference to this quotation, to something which spreads across his face, showing that I really understand how language has been used here and what the effect is. Miller effectively reveals the secret nature of their relationship through the stage directions. So I'm now interpreting what he's doing, and this could also be a link back to his intention. Through the stage directions, so we have dramatic device here, and forces the audience. So this is writer's intention. He is forcing you. That's something that he's done. It's also in italics because it's the effect. So this doubles up. This is both Miller and audience. So it forces the audience to read their body language rather than focus on their words. So now I'm really analysing the effect of that device and how it's been used and what it shows about their relationship. As his smile widens, we are left with no doubt about the nature of their personal connection, a link back again to the question, which is relationships. Through this physical description of desire manifesting itself on Proctor's face, so here is a transition now. So this is a linking phrase to propel us to the next thing we want to talk about. So we've linked back to the smile. Miller is also helping the audience to experience the repression created by the Puritan society, as we are forced to interpret the nature of their forbidden relationship and react to the clues given by their body language. So here we've got effect on the audience. We've also got this contextual link here, which links back as well to Miller's intention. This undoubtedly results in the audience being complicit in their affair. So look at the vocabulary that's used here to make this sound much more assertive, much more confident, and much more academic. Miller continues to build up the desire between them through the stage direction. So I've gone back to my own point here to show that what I'm saying is still relevant, and I've also got a dramatic device. As Abigail is described as, so here I am introducing and embedding this quotation, feverishly looking into his eyes. This description shows not only Abigail's desperation, but also her inner turmoil created by her suppressed desire for Proctor. So this is our analysis and interpretation of what is shown. Miller skillfully chooses a metaphor, so we have a technique here, to suggest that Abigail's desire for Proctor is just as uncontrollable as his widening smile. Now look how we've tied the quotations together. So don't be afraid to go back to a quotation that you've already included. Obviously, we're not going to do another analysis of it, but we're using it to show how Miller is building something, how all of these quotations are connected and are showing us a bigger picture. This is due to the fact that a fever, so here we're commenting on the language used, is something we cannot control or regulate. So it's always a good idea to, when you're thinking about language use and when you're thinking about imagery, think about what is that in the real world? Outside of the play, what would I associate with that word, with that image? Think about that, and then think about how it's been utilised by the writer. A fever is something that we cannot control or regulate. We merely have to allow it to run its course. In this way, it could also be suggested that Proctor is the cause of Abigail's metaphorical fever. So we've gone back to our interpretation here, and when we're really interpreting what Miller is trying to show us, and we're interpreting the relationship and how it's manifesting itself, as she is unable to recover from him. So now we're developing our interpretation of Abigail's response to Proctor, or move on from their affair. By describing Abigail's desire through the terms we commonly associate with illness, Miller could also be making reference to the fact that individual desires are discouraged in Puritan society and are seen as impure or something that must be purged, just like fever. So we have an awful lot of our own original interpretation here, and then we've linked it back to the language choice of fever. In addition, so now we're showing that we're adding something, we're building. The constant suggestions of desire throughout the stage directions could be Miller's way of critiquing an environment which seeks to control or repress people. So here we've got our writer's intention. Even though their desire is sinful, their personal connection, so got reference back to the question here at the end, remains clear to see and creates tension for the audience who are reacting to the introduction of a relationship that is clearly at odds with Puritan values. So we've gone back here to our contextual knowledge. So here are my final tips. Make sure that you start with clear points and try and ensure that they are chronological, if at all possible. So think about the order in which things appear in the extract. It may not always be possible to have chronological points, but when you're introducing your quotations, try and include them in the order in which they appear. Choose relevant and interesting quotations. So choose ones that you think there's definitely something I can talk about. There's definitely a device or a technique or interesting language that I can analyse. You should have a range of quotations that you can comment on. You want to aim for 2 to 3 per paragraph. And like I said, make it easy on yourself. Not all of the quotations have to be excessively long. Sometimes they can merely be a word or a short phrase. Ensure you use the key word in the question or synonyms of this throughout. Make sure you're naming and you're analysing the techniques that you see and the dramatic devices, because this is a play. Analyse language choice wherever you can and discuss the connotations, what is implied, what is suggested. Layer your analysis wherever you can. This is where you comment on a device or a technique, and then you take it further by also analysing language. Link back to Miller's message and intention. You can do this wherever it's appropriate in the paragraph. Link to the effect on the reader, again wherever you think it's appropriate. It does not have to be tagged on at the end. Use context if it supports and enhances your ideas. Please don't just tag it on at the end as an afterthought. And use academic phrases to help you develop your response. And also don't forget to check out my micro lessons. So the micro lessons series will help you with the skills that you need to write an effective literature essay. So thank you very much for taking part in this lesson. I hope it's helped you with how to write an effective response to the extract question. Goodbye.